Another part of MixbusTv Ultimate Compressor Guide. In this video, the best VCA compressor plugin. Let's get to it. Hello everyone, welcome back to MixbusTv. Hope you're having a great day. Before we start, check the info box down below for my mixing courses and exclusive discounts and offer on plugins. If you notice right here, there's a join button under every video. That means that from now on, you can become a MixbusTv member and access to exclusive content like members only live chats, posts, live streams, news, and even mix consultations. So click the button, take a look, and also support MixbusTv. But let's get to the video. Best VCA plugin compressors. I will put this one first because when speaking of VCA style compression, more than a strict emulation of one unit, this might be the closest to a real hardware, how a real VCA behaves, and is the Arturia BCI65. I was really impressed with this plugin. I have all the 3 compressor bundle, and they're all good. But this one was definitely my favorite from the beginning. It's very close to a textbook VCA analog compressor, the behavior of it, regardless how close it is to the real vintage DBX unit, which is actually close. It's definitely one of the best DBX emulation. But regardless of that, this is just a great VCA style compressor. It's not really suited for 2-bus like most VCA plugins that we'll see in this list, but it's definitely a single track killer when you want the VCA style and punch. So Arturia BCI65 is number 1. Number 2 is one of my all-time favorite plugin compressor, is the Valet People Dynamite by Softtube, and there's also a UAD version which I never tried. This is hands down my favorite compressor when I want grit and snap on drums, whether it's drum bus or kicks and snares, both on parallel or insert. It's also a great plugin for parallel squashed vocals, so not just drums. The behavior of this compressor is really unique, and the sound of it is really unique because of the saturation Softtube added, which sounds great. You really need to try this one because the behavior is a bit quirky. It's the characteristic of the Valet People Dynamite, and it sounds so cool to me. I would argue this is even better than the original unit, at least the vintage one. I know they make a new version, but I never tried it. But all the old ones are noisy, scratchy pots and all that. And it also happens to be one of the best gates out there for drums. So just try it. It's not just one trick pony. You can do a lot with this plugin. Number 3, another one of my all-time favorites. This is really a workhorse plugin in general as a compressor, is the Waves API 2500. I have the hardware unit. I did a video comparison of it. If you want to check it out, I'll put it in the link down below. But I don't care how close is to the original, to the hardware unit. This plugin can handle everything. I would actually put this plugin at the same level as the hardware unit for how much use it gets. And the fact that it has a little less pronounced mid-forward color than the hardware unit, although mine is modified and it's not that barky there. It will sound silly, but it kind of makes it a classic on its own, maybe because I used it so much. This compressor, the design of it is brilliant. It's what makes this compressor so versatile and why it gets so much use, at least for me. No matter how close it's to the hardware, yeah, maybe you miss, the saturation of it, the non-linearities, although the Waves has color, but it really can do anything from subtle compression to my special tricks with this plugin on guitar. So I actually developed some tricks in my mixes with this plugin specifically, not even the hardware unit. So that says something. This plugin is really good. And if you remember, I put this one in my 6 Waves secret saturator plugins because when in a specific mode, watch that video to find that out, it actually works as a saturator, so must have. Number 4, UAD Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor. I don't have it myself. I tried it several times on other systems, and it's undeniably a great VCA compressor, although this one has also an opto section along with the VCA. I'm just talking about the VCA compressor. This is an SSL type compressor. We could say the Shadow Hills VCA part is basically an SSL style clone with better components and stuff, class A and all that. The great thing about this plugin is it has the classic Shadow Hills 3 transformers as color options, which makes it fun, very versatile. And UAD, even if I don't have it myself, I recognize they make great plugins, so I had to make this list. But we will talk about the Shadow Hills in another video at the end of this series. but for when I actually want the vibe of the SSL quad comp that is on the console, on the master bus, my choice still goes to Waves G Comp. Maybe because it was one of the first one and I'm used to the sound. I don't use it that much. Well, I have my die on when I want SSL type, but I'm talking about plugins. It does have a sound which is not necessarily as close as others to the real SSL, but as for the 2500, there's something about this plugin that I like. I like that it slightly narrowed the stereo field. I like that it's gritty. I like that it has a color, even if it's not too pronounced, and I like the behavior, especially if you keep the gain reduction not more than 4 dB. For me, it does have the glue factor that I look for in an SSL style compressor. And it's not great just on the mix bus. This is actually a good compressor for drums as well. I love it on synths sometimes when I don't mind the narrowing of the stereo image. I use it on background vocals, and also the fact that it doesn't have a low pass filter in the sidechain like the real SSL. That limitation for me forces you to mix in a certain way if you mix into it or if you compress material with it. It kind of forces you to have a balanced low end to begin with before hitting the compressor, which for me is a big deal. It's not something to overlook. To have an HPF filter on compressors, it's mandatory nowadays, but for learning purposes and to force you to work in a certain way, not having it is sometimes just as useful. By the time this video is going to be out, we're going to be around Black Friday, so there are so many discounts and offers for the G SSL that is probably going to be cheap, and they do offers all the time. I don't remember what number we are, but one of the closest straight SSL G Comp emulation. It's a very underrated plugin, and it's the PSP Bus Compressor. I don't own this compressor myself, but I used it many times, and it was very close to the actual SSL G gray face rack version. GUI might not look sexy and vintagey on this one, but PSP makes great plugins. They're very underrated, and they're priced right, and this one might be one of their best offering. FabFilter Pro C2. This is just a beast of a compressor all around. And FabFilter plugins are great in general. They always make any list, no matter what. Yes, you could have just those and mix any album, but this compressor might be the most versatile at this time. Everybody knows FabFilter, so I'm not gonna spend too many words on it. If you overlook this compressor, don't, because it's not just versatile, it actually sounds great. And it has just enough feature to give you all the control that you want without getting lost into too many controls. And if you want, you don't need to dig into the advanced controls. It has so many automated functions that work so very well that you actually don't need it most times. This compressor, you will see, has different modes: mastering, punch, vocals, opto, and VCA is one of my favorites because the way it behaves. In the analog VCA video, we've seen the first one was the SSL channel compressor. So the plugin version needed to be here because, like I said in that video, you would need 30 units for that because it's a channel compressor. So the plugin is the best choice in this case, no doubt about it, unless you already have an SSL console. And my choice is, again, the Waves SSL channel. I prefer the G. Everybody who follows the channel probably knows this already, but I prefer the G because of the divider on the low frequency. I have a specific trick for the low end, and the multiplier on the high mid frequency, same as well. I have another trick for that. But the reason, because I love this plugin so much, which is, by the way, my default on every channel. It's not just because it's a channel strip, so it has basically everything for my first moves. So filters, great EQ, that is the trick with the compressor. I love the SSL compressor. Again, we are talking about VCA style compressor. Has limited controls. You have only 2 settings for the attack, variable release, and the way waves sound, it just clicks with me. I don't know why. It has the trick where if you turn the threshold all the way up, or up in general, even if it's not compressing, it adds that grit, and whoever used a real SSL G or E knows that that's what's supposed to happen when you turn the threshold up on a channel. So it kind of feels familiar, it feels right, the Waves G channel. There are many others SSL channel emulations out there. I tried most of them. I always go back to the Waves for some reason. Again, maybe same for the G Comp because I'm familiar with it, I know it, it's a familiar sound. And most important, some of the other emulation that I tried, they force really hard the saturation part, which is not what I want on every channel on my mix by default. So the Waves SSL channel, the color is very, very subtle, and it only happens if you hit the yellow or the red. And that's it. It's simple, you know, there's not much into it, especially because SSL console weren't popular because of the saturation. They were popular because of the routing, because it was the first console to have for every channel dynamics, both gate and compressor and EQ, as opposed to NIVs and API. So that's why SSL became popular for mixing. Is the routing and the versatility of it more than the color. The color became after because everybody was mixing on SSL console and everybody was pushing hard, and then we found out, oh, that color is actually good, and it became a standard sound. But yeah, for every channel on my mix, especially when we have so many saturators out there, I don't want like a super saturated or fancy thing. Next one is the UAD DeStressors. As you see, I'm a fan of DeStressors. You see two here, two are on the floor right now. I have 4 DeStressors. I love this compressor. I'm so very familiar with it. The Arouser from Empirical Labs is what I use right now when I don't have the hardware, just because I don't have the UAD. But the UAD, I tried it, and I have to say is actually the best sounding DeStressor emulation. So if you have the money, if you don't mind being tied up to the hardware, UAD is the closest. Next one would be the Empirical Labs official Arouser. But yes, not much to say about this one. We've seen the DeStressor in the analog VCA video, so for uses, for what I like it for, refer to that because it's the same thing. This is very close. Actually, I think it's even better. Actually, I wouldn't say better. Closer to the hardware, the UAD Fatso. That's why I tried the DeStressor, the DeStressor plugin, because I ran into someone who had the Fatso and the UAD Fatso, and they were so close that I was like, hold on, let me try the DeStressor and see, and you know, if I can substitute that with my hardware. It's not there. I prefer the hardware still, but again, we are talking about plugins here, so the DeStressor UAD had to make this list. Tomic The Glue is another plugin touted to be very close to the hardware. I tried it a long time ago, and I actually used it for some time and loved it, and then just forgot about it for some reason. But many people like it, is highly regarded. I remember all the discussions about this one and how close it was since the very first release. I remember there was something in its behavior that for me just didn't let me get rid of my Waves G comp, and I still was going back to that. But again, this one had to make the list because it's so highly regarded. This is a straight 1-on-1 emulation of the SSL G comp, quad comp, so main application would be the 2-bus. For people asking me what are my default settings on the 2-bus for the SSL compressor, my default settings for 2-bus compression with the SSL, actually the dione, because the settings that it has are not on the G comp, for example, but the attack is at 10 or 30. The release is usually a 0.3 or 0.1, one of the two, the fastest one. I don't do parallel compression at all, and my gain reductions start usually between 2 and 4 dB. But at the end of a busy mix with the hardware, I can easily end up compressing 6 to 7 dB. I don't do that with plugins, okay? So I keep the plugins SSL type not more than 4 dB. I don't feel like I can push into them as much as the hardware, not even close. So I keep the gain reduction more like 2 dB than 4. 3 is usually my max on plugins for SSL on the 2-bus. On the dione, I usually use the HPF at 90. It can go up to 150. Some plugins don't have that. And for, again, the dione, my THD, which is the saturation, it goes usually at mad, stays at mad. And for EDM or electronic music, can go up to high. SSL plugins don't have a dedicated saturator module, so you just add a saturator of your likings if you want to emulate that. Although we are thinking about doing something with some companies about my 2-bus chain as a plugin, but we will see that. Yeah, so these are my settings, and that was the Tomic The Glue. The next one would be the Waves DBX, another great VCA-like compressor. In my opinion, this one is not necessarily one of the closest to the original, but also the original is a vintage unit. They emulated a vintage unit, so you never know what you get, especially with those DBX. They are so different one another. I tried several and they're really different. Same for the LA2A, that are so different from one studio to another. But of course the DBX is a standard, industry standard. It's amazing on kicks, snares, rap vocals, any kind of aggressive vocals. Those are the main applications. Single tracks more than groups on 2-bus. This one has a really great flavor, a really great color. I like the saturation that this one has. It also offers feature like parallel compression and some other that the hardware doesn't have. It's just a great plugin. I don't know, I feel it's different than many, so this is why it made this list. It's worth checking out. Again, Waves does sales all the time, so it's a good one to have. The last one is not talked about anymore because it's been around forever, but it must be one of the most underrated plugins in general, not just VCA Compressor ever, which is the Mack TSP Channel G. I see so many mix engineers here in Los Angeles that I respect using this one almost on every track, almost every day. That is funny, that is the plugin that is not talked about almost at all. This is not just a great VCA compressor, it's a great channel strip in general. And the style of compressor is a mix really between the G-Comp, 2-bus G-Comp and the SSL channels. So if you want something that can blend the two, just talking about the compressor, this might be it. Mack TSP has been around forever. They make amazing plugins, and this is definitely one to check out, especially if it goes on sale, so keep an eye on it. All right, but this is it for this video. These were my favorite VCA compressor plugins. I hope it was useful. I hope you liked it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like. Make sure you follow this whole series. This is just the second of a long series of videos on compression and compressors. Leave your comments down below if you have questions about compression in general, if you want to leave a question for the rapid fire Q&A. Follow MixbusTv on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time.